So welcome everyone to ClearAdmit's Deferred Enrollment MBA event. We're going to get into a whole ton of insights about deferred enrollment MBA programs. And don't worry if you don't even know exactly what those are. We're going to unpack all that for you. To get things started, though, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Graham Richmond. I'm the co-founder of ClearAdmit. And yeah, this is probably enough about me, but we're going to get into our guests here. We have a great roster of guests. And before I introduce them, well, actually, we'll go through and introduce everyone first. Let's do that. So I want to welcome everyone. I did want to say, you can post in the chat room where you're tuning in from and what undergraduate institution you attend if you're currently an undergrad, which I presume many of you are. But let's get to our guests today. So we've got Eric Askins, who's the Executive Director for MBA Admissions at Berkeley's Haas School of Business. Hey, Eric.
Hello. It's great to be here.
Welcome. Next up, we've got Gina Cicchetti. I don't know if I always get this wrong. Associate Director of Master's Admissions at Tepper. Welcome, Gina.
Yes, welcome everyone.
Next up, we've got Noah Ward, who's the Assistant Director of Admissions and Recruitment at Chicago Booth. Welcome, Noah.
Thank you so much. So excited to be here with you all today.
It's a total pleasure to have you. And then we're also going to hear from Susanna Matthews, who is an Assistant Director of Admissions at Columbia Business School. Welcome, Susanna.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. Next up, we've got Stephanie Butler, who's an Associate Director of Admissions at MIT Sloan School of Management. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thanks, Graham. Hi, everyone. Welcome.
And you have a background of, is that the Charles? That's like literally a view of campus or something, right? Yeah.
Sure is.
And then we've got Jake Kohler, who's the director for the Wellness Advanced Access Program at Wharton. Hey, Jake.
What's up, Graham? Hey, everybody. Really excited to be with you.
And we've got Catherine Alford, who's the director of admissions for the Future Year Scholars Program at UVA Darden. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, Graham. Thanks for having me. I wish I had a cloud to sit on over my campus as well.
Yeah. And then last but not least, we have Maria Derlipanska, and she is the Senior Associate Director of Admissions at the Yale School of Management. Welcome, Maria.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for having me. Super excited to connect with all of you today.
So this is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about deferred enrollment programs, and we've got a ton of questions, both that are attendees submitted. So some of you, when you registered for this event, sent in questions. And we also have some general kind of roundtable stuff that we're going to get through. I just wanted to kind of preface this session, though, with a comment on the fact that these types of programs where you apply to business school when you are typically a college student, or in some instances, maybe you're in a master's program directly out of undergrad, and can kind of secure a seat in advance are, again, relatively new. And I just going to say, I'm like super jealous because when I was a college student, I knew that I wanted to get an MBA, which I ultimately did go and get many years later, but there wasn't this type of program available. You had to kind of go graduate from undergrad, work for several years, and then apply to business school. And so you all are super fortunate that all of these programs have introduced these kind of offerings. I just want to kind of put that out there to begin with. But the first thing that I thought we would do is talk about this question you see on screen, which is just to better understand the benefit for a student when it comes to applying deferred enrollment versus just doing like what I did, which is you go and work and then apply later. And so to tackle this question, I wanted to bring Eric and Gina on. So Eric from Haas and Gina from Carnegie, Mellon, Tepper. And so Gina, let's just start with you. What are just top of mind, some benefits you think to doing deferred enrollment versus traditional?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, congratulations that you're even thinking about it at this point. And so you're really at a great time still being in school to take the GMAT or GRE test. That's kind of fresh in your mind. You're accustomed to tests. So that's one way to take advantage of a program like this. And then other aspects are just knowing that you have that seat already secure. So again, it's the planning. You're already, you want the MBA, you've picked out your school, and just knowing that that seat is there waiting for you is also a really great benefit. Eric?
Sure. Thanks, Gina. Drafting on some of what Gina shared, I think what strikes me is that so many other graduate programs are built for you, for those folks who you're in your graduating year of your undergraduate, you're potentially interested in pursuing further education, you're preparing, and it's pretty much just the MBA who says, no, stop, wait, not yet. You're pre-experienced. Go collect some experience before you move forward. Your peers are testing, they're prepping, they're thinking about futures with education as part of that system. And you all are too. And we're telling you that you've got to hold, that you've got to pause, you got to wait till you gather some more information. So one of the benefits here is for you to act when you are ready to act, right? We're talking to you folks who are ready now. And there'll be lots of folks who are going to be ready at a different time, and we'll talk to them then. But when you're ready, when you're prepared, that's when to take action. Again, echoing Gina, this is when you're going to be at your best test-taking ability. Once you get out of the rhythm of taking tests, it's a lot harder to get back in. But the other real benefit here is if you are prepared, this is part of your journey, then this is an opportunity for you to be planning. What am I going to do for the next 2 to 5 years? Now I've got, sometimes we call it a safety net. Sometimes we call it sort of that guarantee at the other end of the journey. Maybe you take that risk. Maybe you're like, maybe I join that startup that's going to fail because I'm going to learn and grow and gain information on what I'm going to do next. This is that flexibility. This is that opportunity to pursue in those ways. And I think that's really where the benefit lies.
Yeah, those are both of you. I mean, great points. Like I cannot agree more, especially now that I think back to having to take the GMAT exam after several years of not being in college, right? So getting back ramped up to do that was a little challenging. And so this idea that you can get ready, yeah, just really resonates. And the other thing, I could not agree more, Eric, this idea that, you know, when you're an undergrad and everyone around you is applying to other professional programs, whether it's law school or even just going off to do, you know, masters in a specific subject area, a science or whatever, it is challenging. And I remember a conversation I had even with my parents where I said, I want to go to business school, but that means I need to go and work. And they were like, oh, once you leave university, you're never going back to study, you know, once you get out into the real world. And I proved them wrong. I did go back, but it would have been great to be able to say, well, actually, I'm applying now and I'm going to have a seat reserved for me. So could not agree more. Great points, guys. Let's move on. We have another question here, which is more around like what you all look for. And so what are the characteristics of a competitive candidate for these programs? And so for that one, we're going to turn to Noah from Chicago Booth and Susanna from Columbia Business School. So I'll let you guys have the floor. Susanna, do you want to go first?
Sure. So, hi, everyone. I'm Susanna. I'm with Columbia Business School. As we've all discussed, working with the Deferred Enrollment Program. I'll let Noah introduce himself and then we can dive right in.
Yeah. Hi, guys. My name is Noah Ward, Assistant Director of Admissions here at Booth, and I oversee the Booth Scholars Program, our fancy term for what all of these other people also are overseeing. And it's really great to be with you. Susanna, you want to start by tackling this question?
Sounds good. I think a conversation that I have with folks a lot is specifically on the academic side. You know, I think there's definitely a conversation about what we're looking for in terms of professional experience, but a lot of times I'm talking to folks who are concerned that maybe they didn't take specific classes in undergrad. And that's really not a key part of the experience. One of the reasons you go back to school is to learn, to fill gaps in your knowledge. So what we're looking for on the academic side is really kind of some consistent performance in an area that you were passionate about, you were interested in. Maybe that interest is going to directly relate into any sort of professional experiences you had while you're an undergrad, or maybe a potential job after the fact. But we're looking on the academic side. We're trying to get an understanding of what's been exciting to you and what are the areas that you might want to consider exploring further in a business context. So I think that to me is always what an emphasis on what we see in kind of a competitive application. And then, really being able to articulate why business school. I think we've talked about folks being in their senior year of undergrad and preparing to apply for things and, maybe not necessarily knowing the reason why they want this degree. So I would say certainly that gives folks a competitive edge when they're really able to articulate why eventually an MBA. I'll toss it over to Noah, and hopefully I didn't take everything you were planning on saying.
Well, you said all great things, Susanna. So echo everything that you highlighted. Some things that I would just sort of add on is that very few applications look the exact same. People are coming from a lot of different backgrounds and perspectives. And so whether you've had a number of internships or have been a part of a number of different organizations, I believe that almost anybody who's applying has great experiences and will be terrific candidates. So know that and be affirmed in it. To build off of a bit of what Susanna is saying, though, something a bit more esoteric or vague that we look for is intellectual curiosity. What are the questions that you are going to bring to the classroom? Obviously, everybody is coming to an MBA to advance their career. That's perfectly reasonable. It's why you probably should be here. But at the same time, many of us, I think, are academic institutions that are wanting to advance and develop new understandings, to answer questions. And so if you come with questions, we know that you're going to be bringing something to the classroom, adding something to our conversation. So, for instance, I was talking with a student a few days ago that highlighted that they were really curious about marketing techniques for healthcare programs in urban versus rural settings. And I was instantly like, well, I'll go ahead and accept you. Come on in. Sounds like you've got a lot that you're going to bring to the table. So this is the sort of thing that, think about what sort of questions are you going to be asking from kind of whatever it is that you studied in undergrad and going off into the MBA world, what interests you? So that intellectual curiosity is something I always look for.
Yeah, great points. And I think it is interesting how we'll get into this a little bit later too, but how, even though these candidates are applying for the very same MBA program that people with professional experience are ultimately applying for too, the assessment process has to be different because it's a different, there's less to work with in terms of professional experience, but hopefully we'll get into a little more on this too, because I think that, we've got some questions at the end from folks where, they're kind of curious to know more about, what are the other areas you're looking at besides academics, besides that kind of knowing why they want the degree. And so we'll get further into that. But let's move on. We have another question that we wanted to tackle here. And for this one, we're going to turn to Stephanie from MIT Sloan and Jake from Wharton. And this question is sort of twofold, but basically it's, when it comes to post-college pre-MBA work experience, are there requirements about like the function or the industry that deferred enrollment admits work in? And hopefully you guys will talk a little bit about maybe some risk taking that exists in this kind of world of deferred enrollment that maybe doesn't exist as much in the traditional kind of path. And the other thing was, how long should admits plan to work? And do they need to have a job lined up before they can apply? So if someone's a senior, should they already have that post-college job lined up before they can apply to these programs? So let's start with you, Stephanie. Do you want to take us through your thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to tackle this first question and then hand it over to Jake, who can take on the second one or add to mine. So I think generally speaking, and I will caveat this with, it is worth digging into each school's preferences and requirements, right? Because everyone might think about this a little bit differently, but I think generally there are no specific requirements as far as industry or function that you have to pursue during that deferral period, right? I think we all have length requirements somewhere, generally between 2 to 5 years, but as far as the experience itself, that is up to you as long as it is, a professional opportunity and it is a full-time opportunity. So this is certainly not a chance for you to sort of relax after a tough 4 years. We are still expecting you to push yourself. And in fact, on that note, I would say to Graham's point, you are not expected, you do not have to pursue what we would maybe consider a professional role, right? You can think about, I would encourage you actually to consider industries and roles that are exciting to you. And then within that role, something hopefully that inspires you within that role, really look to push yourself and challenge yourself to take on leadership opportunities. So that could be, of course, you're not going to be managing teams right out of college. We would never expect that, but look for opportunities to lead projects. And as time goes on, maybe you are leading an intern, or you're kind of informally helping to mentor new hires. So look to start stretching those leadership skills, look for opportunities to work in teams, to work collaboratively. to take risks, right? Maybe that's an opportunity to work abroad or just do something a little bit different. So don't think about this as a period where you can be a little bit lax because you don't have to put it into an application. Really use this as a time period for you to prepare yourself for the MBA. The reason we ask you to get 2 to 5 years of experience prior to coming is because you are ultimately going to be a much better student. You will get more out of the experience. You'll be a better classmate. You'll be more attractive in the post-MBA recruiting process. So take advantage of the opportunity, but know, the industry itself is less important than what you're doing during that time period. Jake.
Yeah, Stephanie, everything you said makes so much sense and is exactly what I would try to say. I'm sure I'd use way more and less good words in the process. But I'm going to use what you just left off with to you kind of like relay into the second set of questions around like how long should you work? And Stephanie, the points that you made about like utilizing the opportunity of having this guaranteed seat in an MBA in the future to work in varied careers and not feel like you have to be so focused in the traditional or spaces where people may have pursued their business school degree later on. And with that, in that second set of questions, how long should an admit plan to work? The beauty of these programs is you have flexibility. And for years, like, we're around college campuses, and I know that there's a lot of students who feel this need to have it all mapped out or feel like they need to have it all mapped out. And you have these windows, whether 2 to 4 years or 2 to 5 years, or variations in these programs. This time is actually yours to see where your professional and personal world takes you. And again, you have this guaranteed seat in the medium term, but allow the opportunities that may present themselves to help dictate that for you. Wharton does ask about how long you expect to be on your deferment period in our application. This is probably the last year we're even going to have that question in our process, because it doesn't tell us, we don't use it to inform our decision at all. And we give multiple opportunities to change along the way. So I find most individuals utilize as much of that 2 to 4 year gap as possible. Very few take it after 2 years in my experience thus far, but you don't need to determine that now. And I only recommend you be prepared to work and enjoy the opportunities to live a really thoughtful, proactive, and flexible early professional career in that way. The second question I want to hit as well, that do you need to have a job lined up before your application? And the answer is no to that. In many of these types of applications, we may ask where you're at in your recruiting process. But that April time period, we know some of you will have a job lined up. Some of you will be in the process of recruiting still and interviewing, because depending on the type of industry or function you're hoping to go into, the recruiting timelines will vary pretty greatly. So we look at all the other factors, not the job that you may have secured or you may be still working towards to try to secure, but we're trying to use all the other pieces of information to decide. But we do not decide based on whether or not you've already signed on the dotted line. Basically, we want you to, again, use the time along the right recruiting timeline for you, be in the right job for you first year, whether that is at the time of April or not.
Excellent. Yeah, appreciate you guys weighing in on this one. I know it's very top of mind, as college seniors are kind of heading out into the world after they graduate and thinking about how to structure all of this. And what's great is it does feel quite flexible. I do want to just underline, we're going to hear from Maria from Yale SOM in a moment, and they have a sort of a different structure to their program that I'm hoping Maria will speak to, because of the way that they do it is a little differently in terms of how you use some extra time, and as well as when the program starts. So we'll get into that in a second. But let's move on. We have one more question here that I've kind of teamed schools up on, and this one we're going to hear from Catherine from UVA Darden and from Maria at Yale SOM. And this is just a kind of very broad question, but what would you suggest that attendees do over the next handful of months as they get ready to apply? Most of you have deadlines, in the spring and stuff. So yeah, what's some, just kind of key pieces of advice? And we'll start with you, Catherine.
Great, thanks. That's a great question, Graham. Obviously, continue working on your academics. That's one thing that, as for those of us who read full-time MBA applications for people who've been working for 4 to 6 years, that's one thing they wish they could change and they can't. So you still have a lot of power over your undergraduate performance. So work hard on your grades. But I would say that one area that you could work on when you're thinking about applying to these programs is understanding more about the MBA degree, what it is, what it is not, and why people go pursue an MBA. If you are able to speak thoughtfully to your reasons for an MBA and what you want to do with an MBA, you will be differentiating yourself from the pool. All of our programs have student ambassadors. You can go to our websites and reach out to current students and ask them questions about why they chose to get an MBA, why they chose the program they chose. And for each conversation you have, I think your own application will be a little bit stronger.
Yeah, so I would just like to add on the academic side. Academics are important. Keep your grades up, finish strong. Sometimes we see that, not always obviously, but sometimes we see that grades tend to slip towards the tail end of your academic performance, undergraduate studies, especially as students secure jobs and fellowships and they know what they'll do after graduation. It seems like academics take a backseat. Your academic record is important to us. I think we touched on that a little bit earlier when we spoke about the fact that because you're reviewed in a pool of your peers, and we'll never compare your resume to that of someone who has worked for 4, 5, 7 years, we do tend to put a little bit more emphasis on your academic performance or on the academic aspect of your application, right? And so you want to make sure that it's reflective both of your abilities and your efforts in college. And secondly, I wanted to touch upon sort of taking stock of your relationships, the relationship that you have built over your undergraduate studies with faculty, mentors, managers, and supervisors. It's really important to kind of think about who could potentially serve as your recommender, right? Obviously, I would encourage you to have conversations with them as opposed to just approaching them to write your letter of recommendation. Oftentimes, they may not know that there are all these programs that accept applications from college seniors, right? And so it's important for you to help them understand why you're applying now as a college senior, what you hope to accomplish, how it will serve you academically and professionally. And I think that will translate to a much stronger letter of recommendation. If you, again, not just remind them of everything you've done with them and accomplished under their guidance and supervision, but also what you're really hoping to accomplish by pursuing an MBA.
Yeah, great advice from both of you. I mean, I think I have heard candidates who are applying, the traditional way complain about how they can't go back and, work harder in college at that point. And so, yeah, everyone still has, at least a semester, maybe even a little bit more to get stuff in order and do the best you can. And Maria, terrific advice about thinking about who can write for you. And I think educating them a little bit about, like you're saying, what are your plans, but also educating them about these programs, because I agree that there are a lot of faculty who don't know, because I think for so many years, the MBA has always been something that you graduate from university, you go and work, and then you apply to business school. And so I think it's still, there's some educating that has to be done, even with your professors who are maybe like econ professors or professors that you would think might know about this. They don't all know. So you might have to educate them a bit, and also think about I presume, Maria, you were kind of referring to if someone has had a summer internship and they had a mentor or a boss in that, those are people you can go to as well. So think through all of that. All right, so those are kind of the big roundtable questions. We have 2 more kind of segments that we want to cover today. One is I want to give each school just a couple of minutes to talk about their program, who can apply to it, what's a highlight of the program that they want everyone to know about. And also, then this is really critical, what sort of support is provided for an admit. So once you get in, like, how in touch with the school are you as you go through that phase of working, or in the case of Yale, when you have a 1-year internship in between year 1 and year 2 of their program? So we're going to get into that. And then we'll get into a bunch of questions that you, the audience, sent our way. And we'll do that afterwards. But let's kind of get started on this, and we'll go back up to the top here. So we'll hear from Eric first at Berkeley Haas. Tell us, answers to these 3 key questions here about Haas's program.
Well, thanks so much. First, let me just say I've learned so much from the other panelists today. Thanks so much for all of us being here. It's great to hear the different perspectives that we all have and can offer you all. So let's talk a little bit about Berkeley and our programming. So first, who is eligible to apply to this program? We're looking for people who are in their graduating year of their undergraduate degree, and this can be anywhere in the globe. In the first year we launched it, it was strictly for those folks graduating from Berkeley in our undergraduate programs, and we've since expanded it globally. What we'll also accept is applications from folks graduating from a graduate degree program if they haven't had substantive, so less than 1 year worth of work experience between their undergrad and their grad program. So those folks who've gone straight, those folks who have almost jumped straight into graduate programs and are now interested in business education, those folks are also eligible for our program. The second question, what are the highlight of the student experience in our MBA program? One thing that I think we stand out on is being a culture-forward institution. So what does that mean? We're a small program that leans into the other individuals in this program. You learn as much from the people around you as you do from our faculty, from our alumni, and from our speakers. And because of that, we encourage everybody to be engaged with one another, to be willing to both share what you know and listen from others. And that culture is codified to some degree in 4 defining leadership principles, which are central to both our application process, our student community, the way that we talk about our program. They include questioning the status quo, being a student always, going beyond yourself, and what is my favorite one of these, confidence without attitude, or confidence with humility. And so the type of experience is what you can expect as a student on our campus in terms of who you engage with and how others bring themselves into the community. We talk about the support that we provide during the deferment period. So let's talk a little bit about this. I'm probably going to answer this maybe slightly differently than some of my other colleagues. This period is for us a laboratory. I work very closely with my colleagues in the career coaching office, and we are working on understanding what the intervention points, what do people need and when they need them, from directly out of undergraduate through first job, through second job, through starting a business program. For those 2 years, if you're pursuing a full-time program in our program, what do you need when you've just graduated? What do you need as an alum 2 to 5 years out? When you start to end up in those CEO or founder roles, what does that journey look like completely? And so how does that actually show up in this experience? Our career coaching staff is working to develop programming and workshops for our deferment period. So at the start of our deferment period, we run sort of a welcome kickoff event, and then about halfway through each year, we're going to run a workshop that allows us to engage with you at the different points in time where you are. We're hoping that we deliver content for you, but also that we're learning from you as well. Now, all of this exists in an ecosystem that includes a community basis, which currently we're using Slack as that community, so that you can engage with other people in your cohort or the year in which you joined the deferment period, but you'll also have access to all the other folks who have been deferred. So you at the 1 year out, and those folks at the 2 year out, and those at the 3 year out, you form a community where you can learn from one another at these different steps and parts in this process. We also have current students that participate in that community. Now, when I was at your stage, I was looking like this, or I pursued this particular opportunity or that. It's kind of help you acclimate to the program. And then lastly, anything that is virtual, anything that we can make available to you all, including our monthly Dean's Speaker Series, limited seats to our on-campus conferences, any type of virtual event that gives you a deeper understanding of the programming, that's also all available to our deferred candidates.
Excellent. Yeah, appreciate you taking us through those 3. And I'm actually really excited to hear, how everyone tackles this, because every program's a little bit different. So I'm glad that you were able to bring to light some of the things about Haas that make it unique. Now we're going to turn to Gina at Tepper. Gina, walk us through who's eligible give us a highlight, and then, yeah, the sort of support that you provide to candidates.
Certainly. So our program is only open to those who are graduating from a U.S. institution. So unlike Haas, it's only those seniors that graduating from a U.S. institution. However, if you are going straight through to a graduate school, you would be eligible to apply for a deferred admission program as well. So speaking of Tepper specifically, we are a smaller size program, and so community is very important to us. Just all the collaboration that happens within the program as well. But a highlight, I think, is that our students work with corporate leadership coaches during their 2 years. And, it's really trying to hone those soft skills to help you better manage teams. You get to practice that through maybe leadership positions in student organizations or, your internship. But I think, really working with the leadership coaches, it helps the confidence, just feeling more comfortable. And I think just, makes you that better manager, when the time comes post MBA. And so very similar, I think, to what all of the schools here offer during the deferral time. There are opportunities to interact with current students, getting to know not just your cohort in your deferred admission class, but the other current students as well. And, there's opportunities to interact with career services, our leadership coaches as well throughout this deferral time. And of course, now that we're getting back to more and more in-person events, schedule permitting, you'll be invited to campus. And again, it's really just about building the community for us. So when it is time to matriculate, you do feel you're already a part of Tepper.
Got it. Excellent. Yeah, and I think that is another thing that when it comes to deferred enrollment is just so great. I mean, when I was working before I went to business school, I wasn't part of a community because I hadn't yet been admitted to a school, right? So so you're just kind of doing it on your own. And I love the idea of, having these interactions. Eric actually mentioned, pulling people in at certain points, and here you're talking about career coaches, and it's just so great to have these kind of supports as you travel through that first phase of your career. Let's turn now to Noah over at Chicago Booth. Noah, take us through how things work at Booth here.
Thank you so much, Graham. I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed taking over this program over the last 6 months or so. So to start off with kind of the first question of who is eligible to apply, it's people in the final year of their education, either in a 4-year undergrad program or a 4+1 master's program. So a master's program in which you went through undergrad and then you jumped right into a 1-year master's program. Some of the other programs I know might have some openness to that as well, but I would definitely suggest checking out people's websites to know the exact specifics. To the second question of what do I think is the highlight of the Booth MBA program, I gotta say, I've been really blown away by a number of the things here at the University of Chicago, but probably one of the leading things is the flexibility that this MBA program offers. We only require you to take one specific course, which is a leadership course that you take during your first quarter. But after that, the remaining 20 classes you will take during your time here in the MBA program are up to you to select. And so what that means is you get to choose your own adventure kind of in formatting your MBA program. You get to select and mix and match a number of our different concentrations to form the best education for you. So whether that's you want to pair together our analytics, marketing, and international business concentrations, or our econ, leadership, and consumer behavioral psychology concentration, you can make that MBA work here at the University of Chicago. So I think that that's really a terrific thing that we offer students, to be able to have a multidisciplinary approach to studying business. The final section is one that I've been really proud to develop over these last several months, which is, what exactly is the support and community look like in this deferred MBA program? Well, I think that it comes down to really 3 key elements. First off is the idea of community. Second is the idea of academics. And third is the idea of kind of networking and career outlook. So to start with the community element, we do a lot to connect students in person and virtually. in person. We're going to be hosting a event here in Chicago, an ice skating event here pretty soon, as well as a brunch in New York for all of our students in deferment to get to know and connect with one another. We also have a number of virtual events where students can join our book club and movie club, trivia competitions, as well as sign up for one-on-one introductions with one another. So lots of great ways to foster that sense of community with other people going through a similar process of finding your way in your early career journey. Additionally, on top of the community element, we want to allow you to connect to the academics of this larger MBA program. And so we do that by connecting you with current students as well as student organizations here at the university so that you can hear from them what exactly it's like to be a student on campus. Additionally, we also have a number of the departments here, from career services to financial aid to student life, come and speak to the students while they're in deferment to let them know what they can best do to position themselves in leading up to the MBA program. And then lastly, when it comes to the career and networking side of things, we bring in alumni that have gone through the program to come and speak with you about what the process is like and what the experience of going through deferred MBA admissions and MBA program and then finding a job looks like. So lots of different ways to advance those three key elements of what I view as the foundation of any deferred MBA program.
Excellent. Yeah, appreciate that summary, Noah. And yeah, it's so interesting to hear about all the different things you all are doing to connect your students with, or these deferred, accepted students to the existing community and alumni, et cetera. So very good stuff. Susanna, tell us about how things are at Columbia Business School, again, tackling these three questions.
Sure. So to start off, our eligibility is similar to some other schools here at the event today. So folks who are in their final year of their undergraduate program are eligible to apply, as well as folks who are in the final year of a master's program. However, you must have entered that master's program right after you finished undergrad. There can't be any sort of gap year or time spent in between those two programs. And there are more specific details on our website about folks who may have graduated early and what that might look like for you. But this program is eligible to students from all around the world. In terms of a highlight of the student experience in the MBA program, I think there are a couple different things, but for the interest of time, I would certainly say our location, not just in terms of the new buildings that we're in a brand new campus that is solely the business school, and how that's kind of shifted the academic experience, the community experience. It's really kind of ushered us into a new era of CBS, but really the location of New York City, and the access that students have to alumni, companies that they may potentially intern or eventually work for, just different opportunities to engage with the city on a professional level or on a personal level. And there are lots of really creative ways that different student organizations, whether they be social organizations or professional organizations, engage with the city around us. And that, I think, really becomes an integral part of the CBS experience, and certainly a reason why a lot of folks consider us to be a good spot for them, just kind of considering that location and what New York City can bring to you. Finally, I get this question a lot, and I'm sure we all do, in terms of support and community and what that looks like. And different students will approach this in different ways. I have some students who are in their deferral period who I hear from them once a year. Some I hear from more frequently. It really is up to you in terms of how much or little you want to engage with us. But in terms of what we do offer for folks, I serve as a touch point in the admission office for our students in our deferred enrollment program. So any sort of questions about, what they might be thinking of in terms of matriculation, conversations about potential directions they can see themselves going in during their deferral period, I really serve as that kind of advisor touch point that's available to folks. Now that we are in a new space and in-person gatherings are more frequent, we are working to have more deferred enrollment program specific events. We had one this summer where folks from different deferred class years were able to meet one another. We're planning some virtual events in the spring, as well as another in-person one. So really trying to find that balance of virtual and accommodating folks who maybe aren't in the area or aren't able to travel here, but also making sure that individuals do feel that they are able to engage with other students. We do have a deferred enrollment program Slack channel. We often see folks across the country, across the world, trying to connect with each other via that method. And there was something else I was going to say, and then I forgot what it was. Oh yeah, something else that someone else in this call mentioned, the opportunity to invite individuals to conferences or events that are happening within CBS. That is something that we are able to do in certain capacities. So looks like some things that are similar to what my other folks have spoken about, but that's what it looks like here at CBS.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And let's hear now from Stephanie at MIT Sloan. So yeah, walk us through on these three questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So regarding who's eligible to apply for what we call MBA early admission at MIT Sloan, similar to some of the other programs on the call today, eligibility needs to be, you're either in your final year of an undergraduate program, and I think all of our schools probably lay out the specific dates, right, that constitutes being in your final year, when that graduation might fall. We often get the question from December graduates, for example, if they're still eligible because they might start their full-time role, before applying. So you can get the details, kind of the nitty-gritty there. But your final year of an undergraduate program, or if you are in a graduate program that you started directly after undergrad. So as long as you have not had any full-time work experience between undergrad and your graduate program, then you are eligible. Also caveat, in the spirit of the program, if you are pursuing medical school right after undergrad, or, a PhD program, or a significant graduate degree, you also might not be a great fit for this application process. But generally speaking, those are the eligibility criteria. A highlight of the program at MIT Sloan, MIT's motto is mens et manus, which when translated from Latin means mind and hand. And so essentially, it is not enough to simply sit in a classroom or read a textbook, but you really need to put that into practice. You need to test those skills in a real world environment. And that's so core to the learning that we do at MIT Sloan. At Sloan, we call it action learning. And there's a number of ways to participate in action learning. Often probably the most popular and prevalent opportunity is through our action learning labs. And we do call them labs. We are MIT, but they are not, you are certainly, not required to wear a lab coat or safety goggles or anything like that. You're working in a small group with an actual company or organization on a project or, a problem that they've tasked you to help them solve and provide solutions and recommendations. So we have a number of different labs, over a dozen, I'd say, at least, that are focused on geography or perhaps a particular industry. So that learn by doing methodology and mentality is really core to what we're all about at Sloan and at MIT. And then support for people during their deferral period. So similar to some of my peers here on the call today, first, our admissions team is always available. We are, whether that's a one-on-one call or, during our office hours, to connect and help admits think through what their deferral period might look like, help them, think through various decisions, etc. We also have a couple other goals, right? And one is to create community amongst the admitted students themselves, whether that's virtual through a Slack, like many other schools have. Maybe it's an online trivia experience, or as we've sort of our coming back into an in-person event mentality, whether that's pulling people together for an in-person dinner or networking experience. The other goal we have is to continue providing opportunities for you to learn about MIT Sloan and connect with MIT Sloan, whether it's making sure that you are invited, encouraged to come to events that are already happening on campus, or for example, we recently hosted an event with our career development office that discussed what is it, how many years should I be working prior to coming? What are you seeing from employers? What's going to make me a competitive post-MBA applicant? So that was, maybe that's the last thing I'll add on this note. That session came, directly from some questions that we've been hearing from admit. So one of our goals is also to really stay in contact with you and learn more about what is of interest to you and how we can better support you and your fellow admitted student community.
Got it. Excellent. Yeah, that is, I would imagine that as candidates are kind of traveling through this first phase of the journey, there are a lot of questions around what is the optimal amount of time to work, both from their personal perspective, but also from their kind of marketability, like you were suggesting, to employers and things. So, Jake at Wharton, let's hear from you. What are your thoughts on these three big questions?
Look, there's a lot of parallels, so I'll try to be brief for just for time's sake, but very similar guidelines on eligibility. The way that we've started framing it in the past year, again, it's slightly different words for the same general idea. Any bachelor's degree student, whether a 3-year program, 4-year program, 5-year program, etc., any bachelor's degree student, any full-time graduate degree student who has completed or will complete their academic program within 8 months of our deadline, which is just another way of saying in your final year of study, but within 8 months of our MOLIS program application deadline, which is at the end of April, is eligible to apply. For the second question, I'm glad I went last, but I've been trying to go through so many of the different experiences. So I'm just going to highlight one of the many potential sort of programs, but something that's pretty unique to Wharton is the fact that we are bi-coastal as a program. Most people come to Philadelphia. That's where the program starts for everybody, and utilize being on the East Coast. But we have a campus in San Francisco, and we are able to manage. We have about 70 students in every single class who spend an entire semester out there, and any student is able to take advantage of Scale School. So for those students who are really interested in the tech space, entrepreneurship, venture capital, and other sides, other industries and functions affiliated with that, being able to utilize both ends of the US can be a really powerful item. So that's one of the many spaces, but that came to mind. And for the final question, there's, again, lots of similarities. The Slack channel that everybody comes into as soon as they're admitted to the MOLIS program allows them to be connected to nearly 400 other MOLIS fellows across 4 different cohort years all over the world, and that way you're able to connect. And we care about that social community and bonding and belongingness opportunities that exist. Some of the other program that we provide, and we're very intentional about creating a lot of asynchronous programming, especially given the international scope of the group. And you're also full-time employees, and some of you are going to be working 80, 90 hours a week, and you can't attend the exact time that we host somebody. So we do a lot of recordings, maintain items so that people have access, but we have biannual conversations with our career management team, similar to what a lot of other programs are offering, which is fantastic. We also have been doing a lot of work with our current MBA student groups where they will host different Q&A sessions or workshops with our MOLIS fellows. So connecting them to the MBA community right away. Just last week, we had the Wharton Investment Management Club do a stock pitch workshop and presentation, and then a Q&A with the MOLIS fellows. So that way they had some engagement and the opportunity to learn a little bit as they're getting that experience, whether or not they're in that industry. And we've had parallel programs in our fashion club and with our ESG clubs and initiatives. So multiple opportunities there, again, trying to provide empowerment in your early professional years, knowing that you're going to be working really hard and doing a lot of other things outside of this, but we want to be a support and give you affiliated sort of development. We've made other partnerships with conferences, something called Wharton Interactive, which provides asynchronous and some synchronous simulation opportunities for learning. So again, similar to a lot of other programs, trying to empower those early professional years along a timeline that makes sense for each of you, no matter where you are located and what you're doing in a given day or week.
Got it. Excellent. Yeah. There's obviously, I recognize that it's an unfair question to force each of you to say like what's one highlight, because you all have so many amazing things happening in your programs and that people kind of associate as hallmark kind of traits. But I appreciate everyone doing this. So Catherine, let's hear from you about Darden and so who's eligible and some highlights and the support stuff.
Yeah, sure. So Darden's program is called the Future Year Scholars Program, and we're going into our 8th year of an admissions process. The eligibility requirements are the same as other programs where we're looking for students in their final year of undergraduate or graduate studies who have no prior full-time professional experience. In terms of highlights of our program, I would say the number one highlight is, so contrary to the choose your own adventure style, we are a core curriculum program where our core curriculum takes place during the first 3 quarters of the program, and we deliver our core curriculum entirely through the case method. So really unique and different type of learning style, and everything kind of centers and revolves around the case method in your first year of the program. And in terms of the support we provide, it's similar to every other program. You should essentially think of yourself as a member of the Darden community, the Darden family, and you're able to participate in any of the school events going on in Charlottesville or in a local city. We also offer career exploration support, career services support, and the opportunity to be considered for scholarship multiple times. The other thing I would add is that our program also accepts the SAT or ACT score in lieu of a GMAT or GRE score.
Got it. Excellent. Yeah, that's a good thing to highlight. I think, just thinking about the touch points that you have, and you mentioned career support. So you're talking about like literally if someone's looking to maybe move from job A to job B during the deferred enrollment period, they can come to career services and have that kind of support, right? Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was underlined. All right, Maria, you've been super patient. I know we have a lot of great guests today, but thanks for waiting. And I think it's actually fitting that you go at the end only because your program is a little bit different. So maybe, tell us who's eligible, but probably start with a little bit how it's structured because it is really different from the other, from your peers here today.
Absolutely agreed. So we accept the applications from college seniors through our Silver Scholars program. And you're absolutely right. It has a unique structure in the sense that the eligibility is exactly the same as many here mentioned. You have to apply in your final year of undergraduate or graduate studies. However, the expectation is that you enroll in our full-time MBA immediately upon completing those undergraduate or graduate studies, right? So whether you graduate early in December or late spring, early summer as an undergraduate student, we expect you to join us in August and begin your MBA journey with the entire MBA class that we have admitted for that year. Now, you undergo the first year, you complete the first year of the MBA program, and then instead of a summer internship, which is obviously the more traditional thing to do in an MBA program, you undertake an extended professional work experience or an extended internship. You can call it many things. It's essentially working full-time for a year, and then you return to campus and finish the MBA program. Now, I want to make it absolutely clear that it's still the exact same 2-year full-time in-residence MBA program that all of our MBA students complete. Silver Scholars are in no way separated, isolated, or following a different pattern of study. They are very much a part of the MBA community. The only difference truly is that extended internship that they're required to complete, because obviously they come into the program with less work experience than the average MBA student. Silver scholars make up about 5 to 10% of the MBA class of about 350 students, just to give you a sense of scale. And just to kind of add to the question on eligibility, there isn't a specific major or profile or resume or background or experience that we're looking for. We truly are trying to recruit a very diverse class, both academically and professionally, students from different backgrounds and with different career aspirations. So keep that in mind. We also don't have any course requirements, even if you come from humanities background, really any major across the academic spectrum. In terms of a highlight, I would like to just expand a little bit on the extended internship, or rather how flexible it is. So I mentioned that the requirement is to work full-time for a year, but what that looks like actually can take on many, many forms, especially for students that are looking for a global career. They may want to spend 6 months working in the United States and 6 months abroad in Europe, Asia, or elsewhere in the world. Our Career Development Office supports internship and job search across the globe. Or you can also extend that professional experience to 2, 3, even up to 5 years, okay, before you return to campus to finish the MBA program, okay? And not necessarily in the same role, function, at the same company, or in the same geography. So I think it's a great time to explore, take risk, and really sort of expand the spectrum of your professional experiences before you return to campus to finish your degree and start your career. And finally, on the question regarding community support, throughout that extended internship, you're still very much part of the Yale SOM community, meaning that you have access to the exact same resources that you would if you were on campus. I wanted to highlight here also that we have a full-time professional in the Career Development Office that sort of specializes in early career guidance. So that's an amazing resource for the Silver Scholars to have. But obviously they can consult anyone at the Career Development Office, all of our career coaches, connect with the professional student clubs, organizations, affinity groups, and everything else that is available to any MBA student.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for walking us through. Yeah, I recognize, again, yours is like sort of a little bit different. So I'm glad that you're able to kind of outline that for everyone. So I know with the time that we have left, because we actually allocated like 90 minutes, so we still have some time, and we have a number of questions that people sent to us when they registered for this event. And so we're just going to try to zip through a bunch of them. And I kind of have already teed them up, and we've got folks assigned to them. So we're actually going to stay with you, Maria, for the first question that we have. And I think we're going to put it up on screen here in a second. But we've got, so this one is, as a college senior who doesn't have full-time work experience besides internships, how does someone best craft their story and relay it in their essay or the interview? So yeah, any advice on this piece of it, Maria?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this might be a great question specifically for the Silver Scholars program, because it kind of goes to the core of why the program exists and why it was created. Essentially, one of our professors at SOM, Barry Nelbov, who was the founder of the program, wanted to establish this with the idea that there are college seniors, or again, someone in the final year of their undergraduate or graduate studies, who has a very strong sense of what they want to do professionally, what kind of career they envision for themselves, even though obviously they haven't had the chance to work full time. They have a lot of different experiences, internships, sometimes entrepreneurial experience, etc., but not obviously necessarily full-time work experience the way the traditional MBA student would have. And so one of the main things that we look for in every single application is that interest in something, passion for something. They have to be able to convey to the committee very clearly that they know what they want to do professionally. They've kind of spend the time to reflect. They've had the relevant experiences to show. And so this becomes the story, really, making the case for the MBA now. And the whole idea is to start an MBA program with that, strong vision for your career and to accelerate that career, right, through an MBA program. That's the whole idea behind that. And so my advice here is, I know that it's in a way a very small section of the application, right? Outline your short-term and long-term career goals, but we put a lot of stock in that particular part of the application. So my advice is make sure to carefully reflect on what is important to you, what the skills you've been able to gain through some of the experience you've had, what you still need, how the MBA will serve you academically and professionally. That becomes a really an essential part of your candidacy.
Okay, and I don't know if anyone wants to raise a hand on this, but I have a follow-on that maybe somebody else wants to sort of jump on here. And that is, if you're a college student or even someone finishing, a graduate program who went straight through, you've had, as this person points out, maybe some internships, kind of brief periods of full-time employment, but not anything that would sort of potentially compare to a traditional MBA applicant who's had maybe 5 years of work experience. And so I presume you all are taking that into account, like you're not kind of poo-pooing the limited work experience or the notion that someone's got, fairly limited like management exposure, or they're doing kind of lower level work. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that piece here, because I think this candidate's also just trying to figure out how do they talk about an internship, given that they may know that that might pale in comparison, right, to the experience that someone would have who's kind of applying in a traditional sense. Does anyone want to just sort of jump in? I see Eric's hand up. Yeah, go for it.
Sure. So what this brings to my mind is the language I think a lot of us use for these programs, which are pre-experience programs. And if you were to lean into this idea that pre-experience reflects only full-time work experience, naturally there's this feeling, well, if I'm pre-experienced, what am I offering? What do I have? But truly, and I think this is something that I know I look at with my traditional applications as well, is what did you do during your time in undergraduate? What people did you engage with? What type of work did you do? Whom did you participate with in clubs or activities? All of these are components that I think a lot of, probably everybody on this call looks at. We have heard the term a couple times now, leadership attributes, right? Not the same as supervisory experience. This is, what are the tools that you can bring forward? And there's opportunity to demonstrate those. And I think if the framework of pre-experience is challenging, so it's the language that we're using now. I don't think it suggests that folks are truly have no experience. We're all gaining something during our period in time. So those would be my 2 cents on the topic.
Yeah, and I would add that I think that, there's so many things people do in undergrad that provide, as you say, leadership experience, activities. It doesn't have to be the summer internship that you did at a traditional kind of firm or something, right? There's so many things happening on campus that provide opportunities for leadership that could be showcased in these materials. Catherine, I want to turn to you. We have another question that we got, and this question, we're going to get the slide up here, is about GPA, right? So this person is like, look, the best I'm going to be able to do is get my GPA up to a 3.5. And they're kind of thinking, if I ace the test, do I still have a chance? Because I will say, like, I've heard this too, that there's this rumor out there that for pre-experience or deferred enrollment type programs, academics are worth more. And that, all of you have these average GPAs that are already pretty high. And so this person's obviously worrying about that. So what would you say to someone in this kind of a situation?
Well, first of all, can we all talk about how 3.5 is a pretty respectable GPA?
Yeah,
I mean,
right,
I think everyone on this panel can say there are students in their MBA programs who have 3.5 GPAs from undergrad. So
yeah.
First of all, I think applicants are way harder on themselves than admissions committee members are. So I'll lay that out there. At the same time, we do have to put a little bit more emphasis on the academic piece of a student's profile, given the fact that we don't have the professional piece of the student's profile. I think of admissions as like a 3-legged stool. There's an academic side, a professional side, and then more of the interpersonal communication skill side. And so you do want to try to strengthen all legs of your three-legged stool, knowing as an undergraduate student, you're not going to have as strong a professional profile as students applying to full-time MBA programs. So yes, focus. If you feel like your academic profile is a little bit weaker, you can strengthen your academic profile with a strong GMAT or GRE score. And then you can also focus on strengthening the other pieces of your application. So preparing for your interview, working on your communication skills. And most importantly, this has already been touched on, but I'll highlight it again, understanding your story, doing the work to think about how you got to where you are, why you're interested in the path that you're interested in, and how an MBA is going to help you get there.
Got it. Okay, excellent. I see Maria has put her hand up. So anything you want to add on this one?
Just a very, very quick comment to second what Catherine said, and just kind of tell the candidates that they're not a GPA to us. They're not a standardized test score to us, right? We're truly trying to understand the person behind the candidacy on a personal, academic, professional, experiential level. This is what we do as admissions officers, right? And so sometimes they're way too focused on the hard measures and don't give us enough credit for truly considering the candidacy in its entirety and everything that they bring to the table.
Yeah, great point. When I worked in admissions, we used to talk about how it's part art and part science. It's not a set of numbers, that determines whether someone makes the cut. So yeah, well said. Let's move on. We have another question. And this one I'm going to serve up to Jake at Wharton. And this is, is deferred enrollment more or less competitive than the normal MBA admissions process? I don't know if you guys have compared that to look, but what would be your thought on this?
Yeah, so it's been my observation in the past 4 years that the selectivity for deferred enrollment it mirrors very closely the selectivity for normal rounds, or the round 1, round 2, and other rounds in the traditional timeline to enroll for business school. So very, very similar, and just like smaller populations. The only other thing I'll add to this, it's not in the question, but the only other thing I'll add is, if let's say you apply to deferred enrollment programs and you decide not to enroll in one, or enrollment doesn't come, I just want to make sure we communicate, this would be the same for across schools. It's not going to hurt future opportunity to apply to those schools later on too. So similar selectivity and no harm in selectivity later on in the process.
Yeah, that is a great point. And actually, I think it's one that when I was thinking about business school way back when, it was underlined to me that you can reapply to business school and it doesn't have the same stigma that you have in some other, there are other programs out there. I think law school might be an example where it's sort of one and done. If you don't get in, don't come back over and over again. Whereas business schools seem to be far more forgiving and wanting to see you again. And, obviously you get more experience and your candidacy can change quite a bit over time. So yeah, appreciate you sharing that. Does anyone else on the panel, does anyone want to go out on a limb and say, oh no, our deferred enrollment program has an acceptance rate that is far lower than our traditional program because there's small, fewer slots or whatever the reason, or does everyone kind of agree with Jake that it's sort of similar? Lots of nodding heads. All right. So that's good news, because I think there is some of the candidates who are undergrads worry that, they only take a small number and everyone wants to do this because it's such a great opportunity, but it sounds like it's tracking similarly, which is great. We've got a question for Stephanie. The way I did this, guys, I think you all know, but I picked a question for each program here. And so we'll run through these. And if we have any time at the end, we'll take some live questions too. But so Stephanie at MIT Sloan, what about GMAT and GRE? A lot of, there's always a lot of debate about this. Is one test preferred over the other, as these college juniors and seniors are starting to think about what tests to take potentially? And also, is there anything else that you would say someone should be doing right now when they're if they're a junior now and they're kind of heading into, they still have a lot of time, any advice that you would have that's specific to that crowd today?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, to just quickly answer the first part of this question, I think more and more admissions offices do not have a preference between the GMAT and the GRE. I can certainly say that for Sloan. we are happy to accept either, and there's no, negative inference for one over the other, though it's worth, again, as I could say after all of these comments, just checking the websites, talking to that specific admissions office about what their preferences and guidelines are. But I also want to sort of echo a comment from earlier, the GMAT and the GRE is just one component of the application. I think it gets a lot of attention. People panic probably about this more than anything else. What I would encourage you to do is look at class profiles of the schools that you're interested in, use those averages, use those 80% ranges as a benchmark for yourself. So you do understand what a competitive score would be. And then, this kind of leads into the second piece, but most of these, or both of these tests, there are practice tests available. And for example, MBA.com, which is kind of the component for the GMAT, the applicant facing does offer, some free materials and opportunities to prepare. So, kind of determine for yourself which one fits your skill set a little bit better, GMAT or GRE, and do your absolute best. It is, again, it's one piece of evidence, even within like the academic piece. We are looking at this alongside a GPA, alongside, diving into your transcripts about which courses you took, are there trends, what are those grades, alongside any other, credentials that you might have that speak toward your academic success. The other thing I did want to note is that, the reasons we look at the GMAT and the GRE test is kind of twofold. It's not only to determine how competitive you are in the admissions process, but it's also for us to be confident in your success when you get to our programs. These are rigorous academic programs. And so, that's part of it. We want to set you up for success. And so that's part of it. Again, with the GPA, it helps us have confidence in your ability to succeed once you join a program. Regarding the second question, I think we already sort of touched on some of this earlier in the conversation about, making sure you're finishing strong as far as your classes are concerned, thinking about recommenders, staying involved on campus. Regarding the GMAT and the GRE specifically, I mentioned earlier that there's practice tests available. Doesn't hurt to take a few of those. I'll also note that this is your scores are eligible for, or valid rather, for 5 years. So whoever just made the great point, I think it was you, Jake, about this is just like your first opportunity to apply to an MBA program. So even that GMAT or GRE test score might come in handy later on if you take it as a college student.
Yeah, that's good advice too. And the only thing I would add to this, I think, that came to my mind is sometimes people do perform better the second time that they take one of these tests. And we see a lot of people who take the test more than once. So, if you're a junior budgeting to like prep for it, take it, but also keeping in mind that, you might have to take it twice and there might be some additional prep that happens, between the first sitting and the second. So just keep that in mind too. A lot of people, I know that the folks that make the tests will tell you these are aptitude tests and you can't really improve a whole bunch, but I've seen people improve quite a bit over time. So just, keep that in mind that it's possible to take it more than once. And I don't believe any of you like penalize someone for taking it more than once. Like if someone takes it and their score goes up, you're happy to see the new score. You're not like averaging the two together. You're just taking the best score that they can produce. So let's move on. We've got another question, and this one is for Susanna at Columbia. And this one is whether or not deferred admits can pursue some additional education. Like, could somebody, I don't know, have a job, but also be taking like a part-time degree or classes while they're working during the deferral period? This was an interesting question that I don't know the answer to. So I'm kind of curious to hear what you have to say.
Much like many things that we've talked about today, it is school specific. So to echo my peers here, always double check with the institution that you're applying to. At CBS, you can. We do have folks who are in their deferral period and they do decide to go back to school full time. From our standpoint, that would not then count towards your years of work experience that you need to obtain prior to arriving at CBS. And it also does not then extend your deferral period beyond that 5 years. So you're still in that 2 to 5 year time frame. But if you are in a 1 year master's program, that would not count as your professional work experience. I think you get into a little bit of a gray situation if someone is pursuing a part-time degree while working, because they are still engaged in professional work during that period. But certainly we're excited if someone wants to pursue education further, or if they feel that that degree is only going to help propel them even in a better position post MBA and being able to combine that knowledge. But I would certainly double check with each individual institution. And this speaks to kind of a broader kind of conversation as you're doing your research. We all have different parameters for kind of what your deferral period can look like, or also in terms of like the general admissions process and what happens throughout each step. So when in doubt, I would always say double check that website. But
yeah, do any of you not allow someone to, like, which would be perfectly understandable, right? Does anyone have kind of a rule? It's like you cannot go back to school full time while you're a deferred enrollment candidate. So Jake, you're nodding. Does that mean that you guys don't allow that?
Yeah, we won't allow full-time graduate study in almost all cases. There have been rare exceptions to that, and that's a conversation that we've had, but it's that 2 to 4 year window is for substantial full-time work experience. And again, the few exceptions we have conversations about.
Okay. And is it safe to say that all of you would be okay? Like if someone's working full time and in the evenings, they're, slowly pursuing a part-time degree in computer science online or whatever it would be that they thought might complement and help them to be a better worker. I presume that that all of you would probably permit that, or I see a lot of nodding heads, even Jake. Okay. So.
Graham,
right.
Can I add, I think that
please.
Going back to school during the deferral period is not really the spirit in which these programs were designed. I think we can sometimes be short-sighted in thinking about the job is just to get to the MBA program, and we lose sight of what's on the other side of an MBA program, which is a management and a leadership role. And so if you do not have years of full-time work experience, growing as an individual and as a leader, it's very difficult to convince a recruiter that you are who they want to hire to start managing their teams and leading their organization. And so we really are looking for quality full-time work experience. We will allow you to go back to graduate school, but that will not count as your deferral period. That doesn't count as your 2 to 5 years of experience.
Okay. Yeah, super helpful. I see Maria, you have a hand up.
Very similarly, that extended internship that I was referring to earlier, if you decide to pursue another graduate program, that would be fine. We have 10 joint degree programs, but if you want to pursue another one that we don't have a joint degree with at another institution, that is perfectly fine. If you want to take on a fellowship, that is perfectly fine. But that cannot be in lieu of a professional work experience, but only in addition to, right? You still have to fulfill that obligation of the program, as Catherine said, because that's really in the spirit of the program.
Yeah, and Catherine makes a really good point, because you're not just needing to satisfy the admissions team, the administration at the school that you're going to be attending. You've got to also satisfy the recruiters that are going to hire you on the other end of all this. And so really good point, Catherine and Maria. I appreciate you guys kind of underlining that. We have another question here that I want to pose to Noah from Chicago Booth. And this question is, do you have any advice on letters of recommendation? And I think, one of the classic things that I feel like candidates grapple with is, do I use a professor, or do I use someone from a work experience that I had, or maybe a mentor who's seen me kind of running things on campus? Like where does someone turn for this piece? Because it is very different than what you would expect in a traditional MBA application who's been out, someone out in the workforce where you're not even allowed to have an academic recommendation, right? So what's your advice on this?
It's a really good question, Graham, and it's one that I feel like I answer every time I do a presentation about the Booth Scholars. So I'm glad that you gave it to me, because I feel like I'm well versed on this one. I'm ready to answer it. But yeah, so I think that a couple of things that I would highlight. First off, I refer back to Maria over at Yale's statement regarding, sit down, have a conversation with your letter writer, no matter who they are. Always have a conversation with them about, what your long-term career goals are, what you've done with them. All of that is just good sort of steps to take to ensure that you get the best letter written possible to help jog that letter writer's memory. Because while you may be very important to them, I'm sure they work with lots of students and are sometimes asked for multiple letters of recommendation. So that conversation can be really key. Now, with regards to, who exactly to select for your letters of recommendation, here at the University of Chicago, we require 2 letters of recommendation. I think that's pretty common with a lot of our other schools, but they may have one more or one less. Definitely check their websites, as we keep saying, to get that slight difference. So with those 2 letters of recommendation, we ask that at least one be from a professional source. The reason for that is because we're going to be able to tell a lot about your academic capabilities based off of your GPA, your test scores, things like that. But what we get less insight into throughout much of the parts of the application is your teamwork skills, your work ethic, your problem solving ability in kind of a more workspace environment. And so it's important to have sort of that professional letter of recommendation. Now, what exactly is a professional letter of recommendation? The ones that most clearly jump to mind probably for you are internship supervisors and part-time work supervisors. Those individuals are great people to write you letters of recommendation, but they aren't the only ones that we accept. Volunteer coordinators, organization supervisors, and proponents, like individuals that are in that role that are seeing you working and leading different programs, are also great individuals to provide professional letters of recommendation. Additionally, we also accept if you're a part of a research project or something like that, if you do research with a professor, we accept that as a professional letter of recommendation. We just ask that you sit down with that professor and highlight to them that what we're looking for in that letter of recommendation is speaking more to your professional rather than your academic skills. Additionally, I would say one last note to add on is to consider asking an individual that has more direct engagement with you over the type of position that someone has. So let's say that you had an internship at this particular firm. Let's say that you were doing an internship with Deloitte or something. I would definitely suggest talking with that person who was your direct supervisor over the CEO that you met at brunch, right? Like, definitely choose the person who saw you engaging and doing the work over the position, because what we're looking for is the content of the letter of the recommendation rather than necessarily the person's name at the top of it. So those are some bits that I think are important to keep in mind whenever thinking about letters of recommendation.
Yeah, great advice. And that's something we hear even in the kind of traditional path to business school, where don't go for the name and lights person who barely knows you. So everyone who is like, oh, I have in my back pocket this, person that went to the school who I've really only interacted with briefly, but they're going to write my letter. That's like the worst possible thing you could do. You need someone who knows you and has interacted with you closely. So terrific advice, Noah. And I think this is what I love about this, is that for the deferred enrollment, people have such a variety of places they can go, from a professor, like you said, you're doing research with someone, you've got a part-time job. There's so many different ways that you can go with this. And yeah, so I think that makes it almost more interesting and flexible. We've just got 2 more questions that I'd love to get to before we kind of wrap up today. And so this next one is for Gina at Tepper. And so this one's just about, we kind of hinted at this, but I don't think we got too far into it, but how do people use the deferred period to take risks and explore in ways that like a traditional MBA applicant may not?
Yeah, I think it was you who mentioned, take the job at the startup that may fail. We hope it doesn't fail, but sometimes those opportunities lead to wearing many hats in a role versus a traditional corporate job that you might have as an analyst, or just some other role within a large company where you might only be focusing on one aspect, whereas sometimes those smaller companies, again, allows you to wear many hats. You get a much better understanding, seeing maybe the big picture because of all the collaboration you're having with other departments. Again, depending upon the job, think of asking maybe for those projects that challenge you as well, that you may not have the best of skills, but you're willing to learn, you want to enhance those skills, and so you can also challenge yourself with the projects at work, and talk to your boss, and kind of seek out those ways to challenge yourself in different ways. So it's either like projects at work, kind of take advantage of those opportunities, or just simply by the fact of maybe being at a smaller company and able to wear the many different hats that you can be exposed to in different roles there.
Yeah, good advice. I also feel like I saw a question fly by on the chat about, can you like start a business or be an entrepreneur? And I mean, absolutely. I mean, gosh, what a better way to no better way to kind of learn things that way. So yeah, that's what I love about this, is that you can't, I think to some extent when you're applying traditionally, you're maybe playing a little safe because you want to rack up the right kind of experience or something. And here people, you have that kind of seat waiting for you. So you can, be a little bit more flexible. So the last question that we received from our audience prior to coming together today is for Eric at Berkeley Haas. And Eric, thanks for for waiting. But I wondered, any advice for candidates from overrepresented groups? So, we know that there's some groups out there, whether it's, people in engineering or that, there's just certain groups that there are a lot of them in the applicant pool. And so any advice on like how someone can stand out if they're falling into one of these buckets?
Sure. Well, Graham, I'm going to first interrogate the question because I think we really have to. What is an overrepresented group ultimately? And what do schools do with it, or what do candidates think schools do with an overrepresented group? So you mentioned engineering. Oftentimes I hear about this if it's a particular region of the globe or where they studied in their undergraduate. Among all of those bits and pieces, we have to recall that that's just one aspect of each candidate as an individual. They themselves aren't all that one thing, if that one thing is either perceived or factual, a filter on the candidate side. So I encourage every candidate to think about their own application. You cannot control who else applies. That's not something that you have within your power, nor do you truly understand what the program might be doing with that information. But ultimately, what you can be doing is saying, okay, let's use Graham's example. I'm an engineer. I perceive that there are many engineers that are applying to business programs, but what else am I? What are my goals? What am I hoping to accomplish? What about my region of the globe? What about my motivations? What about my, the things that I've done that are clearly individual? I've led a club, I've participated in a group, I've been a peer mentor. All of those are other aspects of your candidacy, not to mention the strength of your academic performance. And I think all of those are probably factors in the application process. So I don't want to push back. If this is your concern, you can have this concern. It's real if it's yours, if you feel it. But what I'm going to ask you to do is remember that you are more than one thing, and that's how we're going to see you, as more than one thing.
Yeah, really great way of framing that. I mean, because you're right, you don't control everyone else that's applying. You only control your own candidacy and how you put your best foot forward. So I recognize we're kind of approaching that 90-minute mark, and I just wanted to, we've got a couple more slides that I just wanted to zip through. One of them has just a sense of the deadline. So now I think it's Yale actually has some earlier deadlines too, because their process kind of mirrors the traditional MBA deadlines. But I think for most of you, these are kind of the main deadlines that you'll have, and they're all in the spring. So people have plenty of time. And along those lines, we're actually going to get back together. We're doing 2 events about deferred enrollment in February to talk really specifically about each program's application. In fact, we're doing 2 events so that we can have fewer schools on each session and really get into it with some questions about your process, your essays, all the stuff that you require in this process. So today was kind of more of a primer, but I did want to sincerely thank each of you for making time. I know this was kind of a big panel. We had a lot of stuff to cover. Longer than your average virtual event, but I just really appreciate your time, and I learned a ton. I'm just sure that our attendees did as well. So yeah, just, Susanna, Gina, Noah, Maria, Eric, Catherine, Stephanie, and Jake, really appreciate it. I know you guys are busy, and I'm sure that, again, the candidates who are with us today just learned so much. So we're going to see all of you in February, and I encourage everyone that was here today to make sure that as soon as we put signups up for that, you get signed up. But again, thanks so much, everyone, for taking part in this session today.
Thank you.
All right, so stay tuned to clearedmit.com. You can get more information about deferred enrollment programs, as well as we'll get signups available. Probably not right away because it's a little bit ways off to February, but stay tuned. We'll reach out. Obviously, if you've attended this event, you'll probably get an email from us to get you all set up for those February events. But again, thanks everyone. And yeah, just been a pleasure. So really appreciate everyone's time today.